Now, I wondered, your breakthrough, at least to, a public audience, was with the New York trilogy that are, at least to my mind, combinations of Newt Hampson, among others, with detective writers. And I had, I'm afraid to say, a snobbishness, maybe because of the Beckett-Kafka thing, about anything imported to make narrative more lively. I liked it cadaverous, and I liked it inert. How did you feel those things consorted with one another, the forward propulsion of detective fiction with the sort of philosophical paralysis of the other?
Well, there is something gripping about a good detective novel. There's no question about it, because it is quintessential narrative. It's the thing that moves ahead. It's the work in which everything is important. Nothing can be neglected. It's somehow a metaphor for all fiction, in a sense. I am not particularly interested in the form, and I do hope I used it to achieve other ends altogether. Mm-hmm. And I think the only reason why the books developed as they did was because of this strange experience I went through. Maybe you've heard about this. I don't know, but I was home in my room one day. It was, I think, 1980, working on The Invention of Solitude, a previous book, when the phone rang, and I picked up, and the person on the other end said, "Is this the Pinkerton Agency?" I said, it's a famous private detective agency. "No," I said, "you have the wrong number," and I hung up. Forgot all about it. The next day, the phone rang again. "Is this the Pinkerton Agency?" Again, I said no and hung up. But that second time, after hanging up, I said, how silly of me. Why didn't I say yes? It would have been very interesting just to play along with this wrong number for a while. And I waited and waited for the phone to ring again, and it never did. And that really was the origin of City of Glass, the first book in the trilogy. One thing led to another. The idea of implicating myself in the story, you see, became important. And the idea of detectives who were not detectives. And I wanted to remain faithful to that original experience. And other than I never would have thought about writing anything that resembled a detective novel until that experience.
Well, it's interesting because I guess for me, you're 5 years older than I. I came to consciousness in the 60s, and so, for me, the resources of detective novels had already been well appropriated by the avant-garde. Mm-hmm. In one direction by Robbe-Grillet, in another direction by Borges, and then in embarrassing directions, in directions I had no care for, no interest in, by Jerome Charon. Mm-hmm. And so it felt like such retilled ground, that I began to wonder, well, why would Paul Auster, and you seem to me to be one of the most well-informed in terms of the avant-garde of literature, be interested in pursuing this particular trek yet again?
Just because, as I said, the inspiration for the story was given to me in that kind of context. And I wouldn't want to make any more of the use of the genre than that. Anybody interested in detective novels would be very disappointed by these books, and they really have nothing to do with them. Talking about Beckett, Waiting for Godot resembles a vaudeville music hall routine, mm-hmm. but he's taking it somewhere else. And I hope I used those references to the genre to explore other questions altogether.
Oh, isn't that interesting, Paul? Because I would say, this is probably just me and my perversity, that people who love detective stories truly would probably very much like these books. Fake lovers of detective stories want to know who did it. Mm-hmm. But I think that that real lovers of the story love the gestures of the narrative. That is to say, the hook, which asks you at the beginning of City of Glass to identify yourself. Yes, I am the detective of the Paul Auster agency, is a quintessential detective story hook, and I think loved by those readers. And I think, maybe I'm crazy, but I think that one of the reasons why Beckett is not a writer who is rejected by all and sundry is that people respond to the music hall routines and the baggy pants comedians. They're not, they draw in, they are the hook.
Sure, there's no question that there's a charm to all of these forms that we know so well, and to see them used in a different context. But I think the readers you're talking about are the sophisticates, rather than the run-of-the-mill people who eat up these detective novels.
Oh, sure.
It's sort of the happy few, I think you're referring to. I got some very angry letters from people who had read that book, when it was published. People throwing it across the room in disgust. And these, I assumed, were the real partisans of detective fiction.